All right, Los Angeles Rams draft recap. So, just so you know what the chart is that you see next to me, the first number is where that player was selected, then the player name, the position, and finally where they were ranked to go according to the consensus big board. Now, you might be sitting here and saying, wait a second, Jackson, clearly you have accidentally only shown half of the draft picks, because don't the Rams always get like a dozen draft picks every year? Usually, yes. This year, they elect not to do that. Now, they did get a first-round pick for next year's draft, so they added an extra pick that way, although they also lost a pick from next year's draft later on. But ultimately, only 6 selections, which is a new era for the Rams. Not usually what they do, but let's talk about these 6 selections. So first, Terrance Ferguson. First thing that's going to jump out to you is that he was projected to go a lot later than he ended up going. About 36 spots later, or no, 38 spots later. Okay, listen, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a bad pick. Sometimes this stuff works out, but traditionally, if you draft a guy who was supposed to go 84th with the 46th overall pick, they play like a guy who was supposed to go 84th. Usually how that works. There's things I like about Ferguson, though. I did have him as a top 5 tight end in this draft class. I think he's a good athlete, and I think that he can be a really good receiving tight end. I absolutely have concerns about his blocking. I do. I don't know if he's going to be a 3-down tight end here, or a guy who's going to be a tight end 1, which the Rams might want him to be. So we'll see if he can become that. Granted, not every team, not every team has a great tight end 1 anyway, so maybe you can just deal with an okay one. And they do have Colby Parkinson, who maybe they feel like, you have him. You still have Tyler Higbee on the roster. Like, maybe this is not necessarily someone who has to be a 3-down player. But yeah, ultimately should add some value. The question I have is, how much value is he going to add? At pick 90, they, of course, drafted Josiah Stewart. He is such a Rams pick of this guy who, 6'1", 245, so a bit smaller, and not the elite athleticism that you would love to have for for an edge rusher, but he's just a good player. I mean, again, not that PFF grades mean everything, but he was PFF's 5th highest graded defensive edge rusher last year, and that does translate well to the next level. Guys who do good in that do tend to play well at the next level. Guys with high pass rush win rates tend to play well at the next level. His pass rush win rate was 27.7. That is ridiculous. That is over a quarter of the snaps. That's basically every series he's getting a pressure. Like, doesn't mean pressure rate. That's pass rush win rate, a little bit different, but like that's ridiculous to be able to be doing something like that. Granted, 440 total snaps, only 217 of those were pass rush snaps. So small sample size player for sure, and that's part of why he falls to pick 90. But I would keep an eye out for him. I think he could end up being another guy to just add to this defensive line that's already pretty good. Also, I should mention, he went to Michigan, so he still had production, he was playing good competition and did well against good competition as well. So ultimately, sometimes just draft a good player. It's what the Rams always do, and it's why they end up getting so many gems late in rounds, because they have that mindset. Jarquez Hunter, another player who, okay, listen, is this a reach on the consensus big board? Yeah, it is, and that's never ideal. But he's another player who was just a good running back in college, and again, a bit smaller. There's guys who run faster 40s than him, right? Like, there's certain things like that, but he's still pretty quick, and he is someone who's still just an effective runner to football, and really what stands out with him is just his vision, which we know how Sean McVay values that. So for the running back position, which they tend to, after Todd Gurley, they don't really use premium picks there, but they like to still get guys who they feel can be good in this system. They have Blake Corum, who they drafted last year relatively late. You have Kyron Williams, but another guy to hopefully add on to the roster. He should be he could be a special teams guy as well, so you factor that in. They then went with, after that, they went with Ty Hamilton, who is a player who is interesting because he does not have the production that maybe you would love compared to some of these other guys. So he is someone who, again, for the Rams that love their production, that's not really what he has. He's also a bit undersized, so not great production, not great physical traits, but hopefully he's just good enough at that to be a contributor defensively. I don't think you're looking at Ty Hamilton with pick 148 as really anything other than just a body on the defensive line, which, hey, those guys matter. Guys who can come in and play 200, 300 snaps, they do matter, but I'll be honest, this isn't my favorite pick of theirs. They then decided to select Chris Paul Jr., no relation to the basketball player, a guy who was projected to go 114th. He falls all the way to 172nd. Not exactly sure why he fell so much. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't think he's like an amazing prospect or anything, but I mean, again, we're talking about Ty Hamilton, where I'm like, oh yeah, he's a guy who's just a body on the defensive line. Chris Paul feels like he could, especially for the Rams, be a potential starting level linebacker at some point. He has that potential. Granted, a lot of his highlights are like when he's unblocked. He's not a very physical guy, only 235, which isn't that small for a linebacker, 6'1", 235, but you know, you're not the biggest linebacker there, and just isn't a very overwhelmingly strong player. Really fast though, uses his speed to make those plays, and because of that, is actually a great blitzer. So he should be someone that I would think, and also played well in college. That has to be mentioned. So is someone who I think does have. Like, again, is he going to be a starter right away? I think that they're okay with, Omar Speights, Nate Landman, and Troy Reader. I don't know if they need another guy, but they could use another guy. And the Rams tend to like to not spend premium positions on off-ball linebacker. So, therefore, they have to have maybe get some guys later in the draft and hope that they can just come in and play okay. And he should be able to do that for them, I would think. They then went out and got Konata Mumpfield, who is a wide receiver out of Pitt. Again, pick 242. A lot of times you're getting special teams guys here. I do think that's what Mumpfield is. But he also does offer wide receiver versatility as he can play both slot and X receiver. And, I think a lot of people don't really... It's interesting how we tend to view wide receiver as just one position, right? That tends to be how we view things. But it isn't. Like, there is slot and outside receiver, and if there are players who can only do one, well, then that essentially limits you, as you're not really, okay, if you're a guy who's going to be a 7th round pick and you can only play slot, well, now teams might be less likely to add you. But for Mumpfield, who has essentially 3 different boxes he checks, special teams, outside receiver, and slot receiver, you can essentially, as a depth player, now you have, okay, who do you have to think about when you're compiling a roster? Okay, what happens if we lose 3 receivers? Like, okay, well, now Mumpfield can step in, even if it's a slot or an outside guy. So that's kind of why you like someone like that, and probably why you're willing to draft him, and why he might end up keeping his roster spot. But ultimately, it's a very interesting draft. I should mention as well, they did trade away their 1st round pick. Not the first time they have done that. Obviously, historically, they trade them for players. Here, they're trading for a future 1st round pick from the Falcons. It's an interesting selection, and basically, teams overvalue next year's draft just simply or I guess I should say overvalue the current draft as opposed to next year's draft, just simply because you only have so many years as a GM. In theory, every draft should be weighed the same. Every 1st round pick should be weighed the same. But given the fact that it's given the fact that as a GM, if you only have so many years or you're going to get fired, sometimes you have to make sure that you're good right away. The Falcons kind of want to make sure that they're good now, or they could be in trouble. All their jobs could be on the line. So making a trade like that, they got some extra value along with just swapping first. And then with swapping first, what are the odds the Falcons are going to have a pick that's better than 26th? It's not too likely. So ultimately, I think it's a smart long-term bet, even if it's not the most exciting short-term bet. But yeah, and they decided not to go quarterback, which they could have gone with a backup quarterback, but they have Jimmy Garoppolo. He's a totally fine backup. He's a guy who's played in the Super Bowl, right? So he's definitely an effective enough backup. Obviously, maybe not a long-term backup. He's 33. Could they have tried to develop someone? Maybe Seston Bennett's that guy. I don't know. But yeah, interesting draft by the Rams. Not quite the laundry list of players we usually go through with them, but still some interesting ones. So those are my thoughts. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from y'all. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.